Hello, folks, and welcome to this new episode of the crazy Wehrmacht motorized campaign. If in the previous one you may have enjoyed how the Blitzkrieg almost crippled the Red Army in the summer of 1941, in this episode you will witness how the crisis unfolded on the Eastern Front in autumn and early winter of the same year. As I may have already complained in the previous episode, by the time I reached this stage, I realized that I just did not have enough troops. Not enough troops to deal with the many problems that were now arising on the Eastern Front. First of all, as you may have seen, the Wehrmacht on the Ostfront was totally demoralized and lacking organization, and this was also because of the poor state of the Soviet infrastructures. Second, I failed to seal off the pockets in the around Odessa and in southern Ukraine because I didn't have enough troops. I forgot to redeploy my air force in the more forward bases, and this meant that the Red Air Force could just enjoy local air superiority. And as you may have seen at the beginning of the video, I still had to reduce the huge Estonian pocket, which tied up an incredibly high number of troops. And because of this, not because of this, but while I underestimated the strength of the Red Army in Estonia, I tried and failed, of course, to capture Leningrad with a coup de main with von Kleist's panzer group. And maybe you may have missed it, but I was forced to redirect the whole of von Kleist's panzer group to deal with the Estonian pocket. And this, of course, left huge gaps in my front line, gaps that the Red Army did not waste a minute to exploit. And as you can see right now, I was forced, for the first time in my whole Hearts of Iron career, to fall back, to give up lands that I wasted so many troops to conquer, but really because as I said, I did not have enough troops to deal with all the multiple fronts which were arising as Operation Barbarossa unfolded. And I mean, seriously, I realized that then that if I was facing against a human opponent, this would have been already a lost battle, because I guess that everyone would have just thrown all of the mechanized and motorized and cavalry units against this huge gap, which arose between, let's say, Army Group Center and Army Group North, and this would have basically sealed off Army Group North and just exposed the whole northern wing of my front. And yeah, you all know what could have happened if. But still, despite the fact that I was not playing against a human being, the AI proved, let's say, really well adapt and ready to exploit every single opportunity that arose on the Eastern Front. And so because of this crisis, as you may have seen now, I removed the frontline order from the Third Army and set up a fallback line behind the river of, I don't know, behind this river and the line stretching between Pskov and Vitebsk. And while doing this, I also, because I did this because I just did not have enough troops to hold the huge Luga-Novgorod salient. And to make sure that none of my divisions were overrun during the painful to watch retreat, I dispersed my divisions in one unit per tile, just to make sure that all the falling back units could have found at least some rest and some shelter, and not being overrun by the Red Army. And as a last desperate attempt, I decided to, let's say, launch a mechanized offensive against the southern Ukraine to, gain gain control of the most industrial and resource-rich region of the Ukraine, because I thought that if I was controlling those regions, then the Soviets would have not. Sorry, I can't talk tonight. But those factories that were now under my control would have not been used by the Soviets. Yeah, I guess you got my message. And for the offensive, I concentrated both von Kleist and Guderian panzer groups along the so-called Kiev Bulge, and I think it was on October the 12th. Yes, exactly. On October the 12th, the offensive began. And once again, it was just amazing for me to watch how the combination of overwhelming air superiority and close air support, and on one hand, and on the other hand of mechanized and motorized divisions, was just really amazing in melting the enemy front line. And I would say within the first 2 to 3 days, I counted that at least 5, if not 6, Soviet rifle divisions were just being overrun, and they were disbanded, as soon as in the early stages of the offensive. And once again, though, as soon as the advance continued, I realized that I needed more and more divisions to send on the eastern front, just because the length of the front line was becoming way too long for me. And as you may have seen, I was playing around with the front line arrows, because I realized, okay, I do not have enough tanks, so I have to force Guderian on the eastern side of the pocket, just to hold the line. And for me, it was really a pain in the eyes to see my tanks and my motorized division just standing idle and doing nothing. But I thought, okay, this is a crisis, I have to deal with this first. And once again, throughout this crisis, I realized I left some gaps open, and that's why, first of all, I waited until all or at least most of Guderian tanks were in position before redirecting von Kleist units along the southern Ukraine frontier. And the Red Army, despite all the crises that faced in the summer of 1941, still relentlessly launched endless counterattacks against my dug-in units, which luckily managed to hold them. And as the eastern side of the pocket was holding, the western side was crushing all of the enemy opposition, basically. And once again, this proved that in the total war mode, if you want to win, you need to have air superiority and fast troops. And as I think it was the 6th army was dealing with the pocket around Odessa and Constanza, I think. Yeah, and von Kleist's panzer group dashed into the Crimean. Luckily, the fact that the 6th army managed to crush the enemy resistance so quickly meant that now the 6th army could be directed against the eastern front again and help Guderian's tanks in holding the line. And here I underestimated the divisions holding Sevastopol. I was like, okay, I could send one SS mechanized division there and they will do all the job, but no, definitely not. And while the 12th Panzer Division was sent across the Kerch Strait and to gain a foothold in the Taman Peninsula, so into the Caucasus. Basically, the rest of von Kleist's Panzer Group was being now directed against Sevastopol. I deeply underestimated the enemy defenses, but most importantly, I did not realize one thing. When the event to give Romania some lands appeared, I think because Romania was now not in the war, this chunk of land was, let's say, it became part again of the Soviet Union. And I totally did not see that. And when I realized too late, I thought, holy crap, did the Soviets really land behind my lines? How am I going to do that now? And as von Kleist was busy fighting the Crimea, I told Guderian to move his tanks and mechanized troops to face this unexpected pocket of Soviet troops. And this meant, however, that the 6th Army just could not hold its lines. And this, again, was the third biggest crisis I ever faced in my Hearts of Iron campaign, because my troops just could not hold the line. They were just being attacked by the Red Army, and as the Red Army enjoyed a significant numerical superiority, they could just bring more and more divisions into the front line, while my poor guys just could not do it. And I was desperately trying to hold those divisions and telling them, stop your fucking attack, just hold the ground, dig in, please, do it, just do it, just hold the line, fall back, but no, yeah. And sadly, much of my efforts done in the previous month of October were just disappeared, because I was forced to give up most of the ground conquered with my last mechanized offensive on the Eastern Front. And as von Kleist crushed all the enemy opposition, luckily quite sooner than my expectations, I actually feared to lead the siege of Sevastopol into 1942. But yeah, as you may have seen, both von Kleist and Guderian units were now dragged on the Eastern Front and behind an emergency fallback line. And yeah, this ended the first phase of Operation Barbarossa with a lot of ground won, but yeah, many crises unfolded, and yeah, many more surprises that will come in the next episode. Guys, thank you very much for watching, and see you all hopefully very soon.